This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin. And joining me this week, two Skullboys drawn by Nick Dragata, our good friend for the Next Issue podcast, Danny.
Hello, everyone.
And the one and only Nick White.
Hey.
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm super jazzed to talk about comic books because, well, I just got back from New York City Comic Con Thursday and Friday. I feel like I cheated the system, got my full con experience in 2 days, and then I had my weekend free. It's crazy. I'm here to record the show. But before we get into all of that talk, I have two legally mandated questions that I have to ask to get this show going. That is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Nick, let's start with you.
I've been pretty good. It's been a busy weekend. I mean, I say busy, but like, can you really use busy when like I have a busy weekend means like I have a lot of things lined up to watch on TV. Like you can't call that busy.
I disagree.
Yeah.
So, Formula One is racing at Austin, Circuit of the Americas, Austin, Texas, second Grand Prix in the United States this week. And it's also Haas's home GP, so that's pretty exciting. And the Lions are currently losing to the Minnesota Vikings, so that's not as great. I'm just going to keep making as many topical references as I can, so everyone is like, I'm not listening to this episode anymore. No, it's been good. I have been getting outside as well. Went for a big walk yesterday and enjoyed some of the fall foliage, which
Nice.
If you're in Michigan, that's kind of its own little tourism industry. And it's right at that point where, if you want to see all the leaves when they turn before they all just fall out of the trees. And, it goes from being something you want to look at to another chore. But I have been reading some books. I know this week's Goodreads theme was magical people. And so I think once again, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, I followed the Goodreads theme as a loyal and ardent member of this podcast. And we will see if this is true of everyone. Like last time I was on this show and everyone else did their own thing. I'm definitely not upset about it. But I read a book about magical people.
Okay.
Specifically, I reread because I really want to go back and at least try to, I don't know. I don't think all the volumes are out in English yet, but I want to at least get a couple volumes into Mob Psycho 100. This is written and drawn by One in all caps, and that's not. Well, I mean, I guess can you have numbers in caps? It's the number one spelled out in all caps. That's how he stylizes his pseudonym. For those not familiar, a lot of manga artists don't go by their real name. Some of them have a pseudonym or even multiple pseudonyms. That's just how it's done. This was translated by Kuman Siva Romanian, I think. Apologies on that. Letters and retouch by John Clark and editing by Carl Gustav Horn. Sounds like a classical music composer there.
Yeah.
So for those unaware, which I mean, I think most people have heard of this series, it's kind of a big deal. The series began as a webcomic that originally ran on the Japanese publisher Shogakukan's Ura Sunday website, and it ran from 2012 to 2017. This was originally compiled into 16 tankobon volumes. This did well enough that it was adapted into an anime that went for 3 seasons, a live-action adaptation, a spin-off manga series. The rights were then bought by Dark Horse Comics for the manga and Crunchyroll for the anime. It also won the 62nd Shogakukan Manga Award in the Shonen category. Kind of a big deal considering this is the oldest manga award given out in Japan. It first was given out in 1955. So it's been around for a while. For those who the creator sounds kind of familiar, One is probably better known, despite Mob Psycho 100 being a success. One's probably better known for One Punch Man, which also began as a webcomic that One wrote and drew. But the difference is that most fans are probably familiar with the digital manga adaptation, which was drawn by Yosuke Murata.
Right.
I think
the webcomic being like maybe the most MS Paint ridiculous like version of a comic that I've ever seen.
I haven't seen
in
it
the best way,
but I
it's
assume
so
it looks like Mob Psycho.
no, Mob Psycho is like a cleaned up comic. One Punch Man in its original form is like the roughest series in the world.
Oh, really?
However, like it was massively successful to the point where like it was taking down the website that they were hosting on it because it was like people were just obsessed with it. And so I think when Viz wanted to adapt it, they were like, well, I don't think we can adapt when Shueisha wanted to adapt it, I don't think they wanted to like adapt it as is.
Yeah.
Instead, they're like, we need a new artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
For better or for worse. I think One Punch Man fans know the, I want to say, unfortunate horniness that the artist on One Punch Man has for some of the characters that is not explicitly present in the webcomic version of it. I'm just going to throw that out there. Yeah, so more to say if we wanted to have that conversation maybe in the post credits, which will be on Patreon. But yeah, Nick, keep going. Tell us more about Mob Psycho, please.
Yeah, no, that's really that's a real artistic interpretation deviation there. It sounds like it. But yeah, it's interesting for me to see this in manga because I think we're all familiar with American or Western comics where you have creators that have ideas and they're starting off and they might not be the most talented artist. And it sort of you know what they say, limitations breed creativity, or sometimes they breed really weird looking comics. You know, Jeff Lemire started out doing his own thing, still frequently doing his own thing. There are definitely some people that don't love his style. They can go to hell. And there are other people like Brian Michael Bendis, who I think a lot of people aren't aware, started doing his own art. And if you're curious, you can go look up Torso. It's really weird.
It's a bit rough. Yeah.
It's rough. But I haven't heard or seen much of this sort of phenomena taking place in manga.
Sure.
I assume it does. It seems like webcomics are maybe kind of that breeding ground for this happening. So it's just sort of interesting because I feel like, and again, this is a blanket statement, but it feels like in manga, there's always or frequently a level of polish that keeps things from popping out that are very crude or workmanlike.
Well, I think that there is maybe a lens that we're putting on this here that is the things that only make it over to the US are the more polished stuff, right? I know that there are numerous like digital forums and digital places where creators post work that is, I think what you're describing is a little more raw, and that just never makes it to the US. And if it does, it makes it to the Western world in English, right?
Yeah.
And if it does, it's usually fan translated, but usually like I don't know, like there are a lot of places where I've seen some quote unquote rougher stuff being posted of people just like trying to make comics and put them online, and that's like the easiest way to distribute them. And I know that there's an entire indie scene as well that's the exact same thing. It's just 95% of that doesn't ever make it to like a collection that gets translated to English. So
exactly,
like, that's the like conceit here, because I think like you could say the same thing about a lot of the indie comics that you could pick up at a small con or from people's web stores never make it to another country. It's only ever available in English, right? And I think the same is that in Japan, same in France, same in all over the world. So like just wanted to add a little bit of caveat there.
No, you're completely right. The fact that I'm consuming this as an American or Western consumer means that things are having to take a couple more steps to even get to me in the first place. Right. Completely agree.
I hate when Mike adds nuance to the show.
Yeah, context, nuance, understanding, emotional depth, socio-political
Just let me
reasoning.
have my ignorant opinions, Mike.
These are the sorts of things that people point to when they're like, the 4-year degree is dead. It's this sort of bullshit. Oh, well, what if we consider it from this perspective? How about some empathy? You know what? Fuck you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't wait to hear about your magical person book. Okay.
Listen, I got so much to say, Nick.
Okay.
If you would just tell us about what
Yeah.
Mob Psycho is, because at
Yeah.
this point you've just been ranting about the manga world. So
Yeah, right. I just took on the whole manga world instead.
uh-huh.
No. So the conceit for this book is strange, as it says in the opening page, strange phenomena which science has yet to explain still exist throughout the world. So basically, ghosts, spirits, people being cursed, people being haunted, all of this stuff very much exists. And this book follows this 8th grader, Shigeo Kajiyama, who's known as Mob, and it's not for some threatening reason. He doesn't belong on an episode of The Sopranos. He's called Mob because he just blends in. He doesn't have any
Right.
big ambitions. He doesn't have any major goals. And again, like, my understanding of Japan sociopolitically is minimal, so feel free to step in here, Mike, who recently went to Japan. I'm sure he's told us all this. But
Yeah.
8th grade is like a really big point from my understanding, because high school is where exams and the trajectory towards college and all of that becomes a big deal. And of course, that's true in America as well. But in Japan, it sounds like it's an even bigger deal. So it's funny that you've got this guy who's just very aimless. He doesn't want to join any school clubs. He doesn't really have any activities. He's not academically oriented. He's not interested in sports. All he wants to do is hold the hand of this girl that he grew up with, and that's it. But he has psychic powers.
Oh, right.
By the way, and he happens to be on retainer for this boss or mentor of his named Regan, who claims to be a psychic, but he's actually, as far as we know so far, pretty much a fraud.
Yeah,
He claims to
he's just a
perform
con man.
exorcisms, and all this other stuff, but really, with the people that aren't having real problems, he'll try to solve it with, like, giving them a makeover and saying they've been haunted by, like, an appearance ghost, or saying that someone is haunting their back when they have back problems, and then just giving them deep tissue massage and saying that he exorcised the demons. But when real demons or spirits are involved, he calls up Mob and brings Mob in to try to solve his problems for him. It appears that, like, Regan's only real superpower is paying below minimum wage to Mob.
Yeah.
His superpower sounds like it's getting his own spin-off series.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
did. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he did, right?
And
yeah.
he did. So, yeah, it's interesting. As someone who knows very little about One Punch Man, it seems to have that trajectory of starting off with a character that's very powerful, really doesn't have anywhere to go. You don't have that normal trajectory of zero to hero, or Ash having one Pokemon and claiming he's going to get all of them, right? You have this guy who's already pretty close to the top, doesn't really have any ambitions, doesn't really have much of anywhere to go. Where does the book go? So it's really interesting to see that similar motif here.
Right. There is a myriad of discussion that I could have about this point right now, because my friend who I was at New York City Comic Con with blew my mind thinking about, like, what is the main difference between Western comics and, like, Eastern comics, and specifically, like, Japanese comics. And it's this idea of, like, characters build up, right? In Japanese comics, they build up from nothing to get to the ultimate power. We go from Goku, who's just a little kid who kind of knows how to fight, all the way up to Super Saiyan 4, whatever, right? Whereas in Western comics, a lot of times superheroes kind of start with all their powers and all of their, like, capabilities. Maybe they'll grow a little bit, but, like, they come in at 100%. So the fact that Mob Psycho and One Punch Man starts with these characters who are at 100% is like a dramatic shift in the way that a lot of Japanese, like, storytelling happens in manga. So I think it's funny to see someone like One doing this thing that feels like very groundbreaking for manga. But it's kind of a Western way of telling stories. But the way that One approaches it is very, like, comedic. Like, this is ridiculous. This character just does all this stuff. Because if I remember correctly, Mob Psycho is kind of a funny manga. One Punch Man is like a serious, almost gag manga that has incredible fight scenes. So it's interesting to see how these creators approach that, because in my mind, that's how Batman is. We know Batman is, like, he's the best detective, blah, 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 and he does all these things. So anyway, I don't know. There's more to be said probably, but I love that.
Did you miss the 9 panels in which Bruce Wayne became Batman?
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. The one page where Spider-Man got all of his powers.
Yeah, we got a whole page of him reaching the peak of every aspect that makes him Batman.
True. Anyways, Nick, sorry to completely
Yeah.
interject there. I think it's very
No.
interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah, it definitely seems interested in subverting a lot of sort of hero's journey or typical
Hmm.
superhero, or even this zero to hero motif that I feel like I've also seen a lot in manga, where you've got someone who's obsessed with having to climb all the rungs to
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
top, right? You got to beat the best to be the best, right? And he's already there, and all he wants to do is join the, muscle fitness club because he thinks it's going to make him beautiful so he can hold the
Uh-huh.
hand of a girl. And maybe this book is going nowhere, but then this cult shows up, this smiling face cult, and they're like, "We'll make you beautiful if you join us." And he's like, "Well, I mean, if that's true, then I'll join." And they have these cult rituals, and but of course he's like immune to it, so
Hmm. Hmm.
it's it's funny, it's stupid. I think the mileage for a lot of people, how far they're going to get, really depends on if you can sit with the art long enough, because
Sure.
it is, I don't know if I'd say it's crude as much as it's very basic.
Yeah.
Um and it's fine. But yeah, I like it because it just wants to play with and mess with a lot of these motifs that you see in both Eastern and Western comic book works. So um, hopefully I can get a
Cool.
couple more volumes in. That's the hope.
Well, Nick, I'll mail you volumes 2 through 4 if you want, because they've
Yeah,
just been sitting in my shelf. But and I haven't read them. I should maybe read them, then I'll mail them to you. How
yeah,
about
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, Danny, what about you? How have you been? How have comic books been? You've had a busy weekend as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I have. I'm glad Mike put me before him because, like, obviously the convention I went to is no New York Comic Con.
Sure.
But I was just like literally 20 minutes before we started recording, I was down the street at my local convention center for the Dallas Fan Festival. And man, I mean, I did a lot. I was there yesterday all day, a lot of panels, got some commissions, got some pictures. I'll go into a lot more detail with a vlog probably on my channel if you guys want to check it out. But I had a really good time. I got to meet a couple of Superman. I got to meet a Sith Lord and a bunch of legends from of tomorrow. So like, yeah, it was and Lois Lane gave me a $20 bill. So like, that feels like
Whoa.
a convention complete. So like, it was really really fun. Um, and it was the first time that I got to go as press. So like, that was cool too. Like,
Hell yeah, dude. That's awesome.
look at this guy opening doors. Now, granted, I had already bought a ticket to go, but either way,
Sure.
feels nice to walk in there. But as far as comics, and look, I could have picked a magical person. There was a new Moon Knight book that came out this week, but I
Hmm.
said
Hmm.
no way. There's no way. I don't know when I'm going to be on the show next. I haven't looked at the schedule. There's no way I'm not talking about this book. And before I talk about that book, I just want to say real quick, pick up Batman Full Moon because it's Batman fighting a werewolf, and it's super rad, and and the main cover is glow in the dark, and like, so like every gimmick possible is in this
Awesome.
book. But for those that are still doubtful, it's by Rodney Barnes, who did Bitterroot,
Hmm. Hmm.
with art by Steven Subic, who did Riddler Year One. So like, there's also really good people behind this book.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so, so if you don't just buy it for the gimmicks, buy it for the talent behind the book. But the book I really want to talk about is Batman and Robin Year One. This is a new series from DC Comics by Mark Waid and Chris Samney. And that should probably be all I need to tell you, so you can be like, oh yeah, I'm on board with this book.
Yeah, I'm in. I'm in.
Uh, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more. So this book focuses on the early days of the dynamic duo, like any good Year One story, right? We seeing Bruce like adapting to having taken in Dick Grayson as his ward. We see young Dick Grayson who's fearless. He's still chasing that thrill. He's still getting used to fighting crime. So he's definitely not he's a more reckless Robin than you would probably expect. You know, like I feel like this book really separates the difference between Batman and Robin and how they approach fighting crime. Obviously, Robin started a lot younger, but what I really enjoyed was that you have Chris Samney, who his style just screams like, hey, this is an old comic book story from the past time. Look at this classic style, but somehow it feels fresh and contemporary.
Yeah.
So that was like, I was fully on board for that. And overall, the plot is like, what happens when a new big bad comes into town? Like even Two-Face is scared of this guy. So like, I really, really want to see where we're gonna go from here. Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed the book. I think I forgot to actually pick it up from my shop because it wasn't on my pull list, and I was looking through my giant pile of comic books here at my desk, and I was like, oh, I don't have it. I can't show the camera on my book in any videos. Um, but I really recommend it. I mean, Savney and Wade, they did a really cool Captain America run, and like everything that Mark Wade has been doing at DC, like since he came back, since he became one of the engineers of like, he's kind of running the main prime side of DC, right? Not the absolute stuff, but like the main side of it. The absolute power thing that just ended, and I feel like the other thing about this book is, with his World's Finest, that is also like a story in the past. He's been adding new concepts that then kind of come into the contemporary stuff. So like I feel like this book is also not gonna be a cool story, not just gonna be a cool story, but it's gonna change like some of the DC stuff in the future, and like maybe this evil or whatever this new villain will come in and be a stronger threat, and throughout multiple books, because that's what he did with the Devil Neza and the Lazarus stuff, and then with Absolute Power, and like right now he's doing sorry, I'm talking about World's Finest now. We're seeing a battle with Eclipso, and I was like, I've never read an Eclipso book, and I've always wanted to because I just saw him in that Villains Month cover, and I was like, oh, this dude looks cool. So yeah, Mark Waid, man, I don't know if he'll ever run out of superhero stories. It's insane.
I don't think it's possible. He's just constantly cooking new ideas for every superhero possible. It's crazy.
Yeah, but yeah, it's been a really, really busy few days. But Mike, why don't you tell us about what you've been doing and reading and all that?
Well, like I said, went to New York City Comic Con, had a good time. Went there with my good pal Kyle, who I play in a D&D game with him and Nick and wife and another friend. And so he and I got to catch up and actually talk about things that weren't just our D&D game, which was great. And we did talk about our D&D game quite a bit, but at the same time, walked around the artist alley, walked around the show floor. We had a blast, honestly. It was like one of the cooler conventions or New York City Comic Cons that I've been to. I feel like I used to go to New York City Comic Con like 4 days or 3 days or whatever, and it would just be like a rush and be really overwhelming, and I would feel like there were just lines everywhere. But this year there was something like very chill about Thursday and most of Friday. While it was pretty busy on Friday, like Thursday was crazy, just low key. Like it was still filled with a lot of people. But there wasn't like crazy lines for people in the artist alley. There wasn't a crazy amount of like, I don't know, things that I couldn't get access to. It felt like it just like clicked. It was like the right level of like busy without being overwhelming. So I had like a really, really good time. If you've seen me post a couple things on our Discord or a TikTok or whatever, I posted some photos that I took and some commissions that I got. I managed to get a commission by Clay Mann, which basically means that my Gambit book is done. I don't have to get any more commissions. It's done. That is the peak Gambit for me. Also, I managed to get a Gambit by Jeff Lemire, which I never thought would ever be possible. We're never going to see Jeff Lemire draw Gambit, and I'll eat a shoe live on camera if that ever changes. But nonetheless, Jeff Lemire is never going to draw Gambit, so to get him in my book is insane. He was extremely kind. Honestly, he was just happy that folks were showing up with copies of his books, right? Like people brought Fish Flies and Minor Arcana and Animal Man, and someone brought an Essex County book, and there was only a couple people in line when I went to see him. It was incredible. He was really nice. Martin Morazzo. I said this to the IRCB folks. I have to say this now on the public feed, because we're going to talk way more about the conventions that Danny and I went to in the post credits, which will be on Patreon. But Martin Morazzo, I went to talk to him. I was like, hey, would you mind signing these trades that I've got? I brought my Ice Cream Man stuff, and I was like, really, really love your book. Before I go, here's my card. I work for this podcast called Irie Comic Books called IRCB. And he looks at me and he goes, IRCB. And I was like, what? He's like, you're from IRCB. He's like, I really, and so he talked to me a little bit about how he loved the episodes that Nick and I have recorded talking about Ice Cream Man, which is really, really cool. And he said, did you find the secret IRCB I left in the comic for you? And I was like, what are you talking about? No, like, for those of you that maybe don't listen to the Ice Cream Man episodes, I understand. But Nick and I do a very deep dive at analyzing and overanalyzing like the pages and everything that there is about Ice Cream Man. And in one of them in particular, we talked about how crazy it was that there was just these ICMs in the background in a lot of the pages when there was like branding. Everything was ICM, Ice Cream Man branded. And so in the background of issue 30, there is a small IRCB on like a speaker. And if anybody finds
it's on the back of a monitor.
It's on the back of a speaker monitor. And if anybody or monitor, whatever, if anybody
monitor,
finds it, send me a screenshot and I'll send you a free comic book or something. I dare you to find it. Nick had to go through the comic like 3 times to find it. So if you can find it, send me an email, ircbpodcast@gmail.com. But anyways, it was an incredible experience. Talked to a lot of people. Our good pal Dave Baker and I chit-chatted. I almost accidentally stole a comic book from him, and he almost beat me up for it. And yeah, it was a really good time. I had a blast. And again, we're going to talk more about it, but I did read some comic books, so I got to talk about them. And that for our Goodreads theme, Magical People, which includes magical girls, I was going to read a Sailor Moon comic, but then I ran out of time. So instead, I did sit down and read Black Cloak number 7 through 9. This is written by Kelly Thompson with art by Meredith McLaren. This is the new arc that this book came out with. There's been a big break in Black Cloak. And as I said in my notes, it's a new arc, it's a new day, it's a new life for our former Black Cloak Essex. And besides that little spoiler, I want to keep this clean of what may have happened in the end of the first arc, because boy, oh boy, it was momentous. I like that this new arc is a whodunit, where the who suddenly becomes a why and the why suddenly becomes a how. And there's all sorts of world building to explain things. And it gets extremely complex as the storyline just tumbles at this unbelievable pace, like a snowball going down a mountain. It just like keeps building and growing and moving faster. And I love that Thompson just kind of like spoon fed us the beginning of this. Like, here's a cool idea. Like maybe there's a murder mystery. And then it just slowly but surely explodes. I feel like this is kind of what happened in the first arc, but the pacing on this new arc feels way faster, and I really, really like it. I think jumping right into this new arc after a big break from issue 6 is a little off-putting because I couldn't remember who was who and what happened and whatever. But Thompson and McLaren, they get you up to speed somewhat fast. I think like a summary, if you found something online just kind of summed up the first arc, might help just a little bit. But overall, like once you get into this story, you're hooked. New characters, new twists and turns, new like world building stuff that has happened that you get caught up with really quick through context clues. It's really, really fun. And I'll say this again. I think this is what I've said about the series so far, like in the first 6 issues. If you want magic and lore and urban fantasy that really gives no hand holding, this series is for you. Like you really can just dive into this world and feel like you're experiencing something so much bigger than the story at hand. Thompson really, really does a great job of like making you feel like there's so much more than just the story that's happening here. And it's really fun. It's unexpectedly dense at times, but it clicks for me. Like every single issue, like McLaren's art sells me every single page turn, but the story is still really, really good too. Like Thompson really knows how to do this comic. She clearly loves everybody that she's writing. And I totally love this series, totally recommend it. And there's a lot of magic in the book because it's about fairies and elves and mermaids and all sorts of stuff. So, this counts for the Goodreads theme as far as I'm concerned. But Black Cloak, highly recommend it.
And you're going to hear a little bit more about Thompson later on in the episode. But I love Black Cloak. I'm up to date only with the first volume because I'm trade waiting it. I think it just, I feel the story. I'm kind of, if I'm reading month to month, I'm reading so much that I'll forget exactly what happened in the last Black Cloak. So like, I just want to enjoy it all like in little pieces. But it's really good. I remember the first time I read the first issue through the Substack that they released it on Thompson Substack like a long time ago when that whole thing was happening, and I was like, I don't know if I like McLaren's art, like. But then I the second time I checked it out, then I find it all kind of clicked into place. So like, I'm really glad that I went back to reread it because then it clicked and I actually got to this amazing story. So I can't wait. I can't wait to see, but I'm really glad to hear that it's very good, Mike.
Yeah, I didn't know where she was going to go with the series after the first arc, but I'm so glad with the direction that she's taken it. Like, I really, really enjoy it so far. I'm right there with you, Danny. Like, I do misremember things sometimes or forget things every month, but this book to me is one of those things that shoots right to the top. Like, every time it comes out, I'm like, I got to read this next, or at least in the first couple books that I'm going to read that week. So, yeah, Black Cloak is incredible. Everybody go read that book. But let's move on. Let's talk about comics that are on the top of our pile, comics, whether they're new or old or just something you're trying to get off of your shelf or from the library, maybe. I guess before we talk about what we're going to be reading, I want to shout out some of the folks that are hanging out with us on our Discord. CK is going to be reading The Forged Volume 3. Hugh's going to be reading The Moon is Following Us number 2. And I'm going to just plug a little reminder here for folks that we have so much stuff on our Patreon, patreon.com/IRCB podcast. Paul and I just recorded an episode of A Better Batmobile that's coming out later this month. We just dropped the latest I Read Comic Books Movie Club episode where we talked about Hellboy. And then we've got like hundreds of other episodes in the backlog. So if you're interested in any of that, you want to see schedule updates, you want to see top of my pile posts, which should be coming back, I think today I'll be posting that. All that stuff is on our Patreon, patreon.com/IRCB podcast. Go check it out. $2 a month gets you access to so much stuff. And we might be changing things in the near future to give folks just access to a lot more, much more easier. So check that out.
And if you're looking for a book club, the IRCB book club is back up and running. I think,
It is.
Are we doing 8 billion genies next?
8 billion genies on the Discord. We're going to be talking about that on October 26th at 2 p.m. So if you're listening to this episode on Wednesday, it's coming out on Saturday. We're going to be hanging out. So make sure to read that. Yeah. Come join us.
Discord is free and available to everyone.
Yeah.
So if you've been looking to get into a comic book club and don't have the time to like actually travel somewhere, just join us on Discord.
Yeah, it's a good bunch of folks talking about comic books. But let's talk about the books that we're going to be reading next. Nick, what is on the top of your pile this week?
So for me, it's gonna be Convert number 3, which is saying something because honestly, like, there are so many good books coming out this week. It was really, really, really hard to pick.
Totally.
There's like a Choose Your Own Adventure Star Trek Lower Decks book coming out. You got the new issue of Dead Eyes. You got the new issue of Void Rivals. The new issue of Hunger in the Dusk. The other one that I nearly picked, Godzilla's Monster Piece Theater by Tom Scioli, doing a Godzilla book where Godzilla meets the Great Gatsby. I wish I could make that up. I am sure that is Paul's pick for this week.
Yeah.
No doubt in my mind. But for me, it's got to be Convert number 3. I first picked the first issue of this series back when we had Jaissle, the bad boy of comics, Lonergan on the show. I didn't pick that name. He did. He was making a big fit about it before the show. Call me this. You know, every rock star is like, oh, I want the M&Ms in my dressing room. Jaissle was like, I'm the bad boy of comics. Call me the bad boy of comics. Big deal. We get it, Jaissle. So Convert number 3 is from Image Comics. It's written by John Arcudi, perhaps best known for The Creep, The Mask, BPRD, Two Moons, new artist Savannah Finley, with colorist Miguel Coe, letterer Michael Jaissle, cover artist Simon Gain. This issue is number 3 of a 4-part miniseries. I actually forgot this is a miniseries.
Same.
After reading the first 2 issues, it felt like the scope and scale of this story could honestly effortlessly expand into multiple volumes. So I was kind of shocked when I remembered it's a miniseries. Although these days with Image, you know, they'll say miniseries and it'll start sprouting multiple volumes. So who knows?
Right.
As a very brief recap about this book, it's a sci-fi book that follows the science officer Orin Kutella. He's part of a voyage, you know the spiel, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before, etc., so on, whatnot, blah, 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 blah. That is, until while he's sketching weird-ass plants in his journal, his crewmates managed to blow themselves up troubleshooting a blocked fuel valve. These truly aren't the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. because you can bet your ass that wouldn't have happened if Geordie LaForge was on board.
Sure.
We begin to follow Cutella as he starts documenting his being stranded. He buries his crewmates. He calculates that his rescue would take a minimum of 27 and a half years, assuming a rescue mission happens at all. We watch him struggle with the ghosts of his shipmates, the fact that he discovers he can't eat the flora and fauna because it's all poisonous to him, and the realization that he's not alone. Surprise. Without giving much more away, the second issue sort of introduces this frame narrative where we discover that a rescue party was actually sent after him. They find his journals from which the story continues. I'm very interested to see if or when these two stories intersect, because the frame narrative really doesn't seem necessary unless they intersect, because otherwise it could honestly just be journals that are, found by the reader, or it could just be a conceit that it starts out as a journal and we just follow him. So I'm really interested to see where these intersect, because there's this weird little mystery, not that much of a mystery, where they notice that as his journal entries go on, they start in English, but at a certain part, they start turning into this weird language of symbols and squiggles that they can't understand. They don't know what it means. But it's a beautiful looking book. Finley does a great job. Very interested to see where this book goes. And again, just very shocked as I came back to the book to have to remind myself that this is only actually going on for 4 issues, because it honestly feels like this could become a series. Maybe it will be. Who knows?
Or it'll be like The Weatherman, where it's like actually a 12-issue series or 18-issue series that they break up into 3 volumes.
Yeah, over the stretch of multiple years. Yeah. Who knows?
I meant to ask Nathan Fox about that, but I didn't get a chance to talk to him.
Go over and bang on his table and just get pissed off.
Yeah.
I mean, look, people like this is the double-edged sword of Image Comics. It's great that these books can't come back unless the creators want to do it, but it does mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had to Google things and go down a subreddit of posts where people go, is this book canceled or is this book done? And no one knows. So that's just how the game is played.
Yeah.
I gotta say, Nick, I thought I was a betting man, and I would have really figured you would have picked Alien Romulus one shot.
Yeah, I thought so too, but I haven't seen the movie yet, and it's supposed to explain the lead up. And so, not having seen the movie, I felt, we'll wait and see. The movie just went on demand. It's now just a question of whether or not I want to pay $30 for, I guess I could wait for the physical disc, or if I'm impatient, I could buy a digital copy and then hope and pray that within 7 years, the company that I am renting the digital copy from doesn't get, fold. And,
yeah.
It'll be on Disney Plus forever once that comes out. So don't worry about it, Nick.
True.
Disney Plus.
True.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Like, if they probably like PG it, cut out all the blood, and
I guess I have
rainbows.
I have the Hulu combo, so it's just one app now for me.
Right.
So but yeah.
Well, before we get too deep into Alien talk, and we're already too deep, let me talk about a book that I'm reading this week. I'm looking forward to. I picked this up at New York City Comic Con because this is how I do the show now, is I go to a convention, then I pick up a thing. But I'm going to read this book called Burn Man. This is by Sean Carunero. This is from Radiator Press. This is the guy that was tabling with, I should say, Jeff Lemire was tabling with. I think Sean had the table and then Jeff split the table with him. But yeah, so I was waiting in line. I was looking over all the kind of original graphic novels that Sean had, and this one caught my eye, if only because it's got this like very gritty, like black and white cover, and the book itself is like very gritty, like pure black and white, no grays. It's all black and white. It's very, very interesting, very beautifully drawn. Honestly, just like flipping through the pages, it is a gorgeous looking book for being pure black and white. The pitch that Sean gave me while I was talking to him was really exciting. But the Radiator Press pitch is even better, which is an action adventure horror graphic novel for adults about ACAB, books, death, fire, love, magic, and rituals. I'm in. I'm sold. I'm done. I'm so in. This is so cool. The fact that like this book is pretty short, it's a pretty thin little book. I'm very excited to see how deep this book goes into all of those topics. But I have a feeling, we know that comics, being the best storytelling medium possible, has the capability of being dense without being overwhelming. And I'm very excited to see what Sean does with this book. The fact that he had so many books on his table makes you think he really knows what he's doing. And I'm jazzed to try something new from a creator that I hadn't heard of until I went to the convention. So Burn Man by Sean Curanero. So that's me.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That sounds
Danny,
a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now, and when the thing is, it's like the art kind of reminded me of like a rougher, like Frank Miller, Klaus Janson, Sin City style. And I like that like look overall. So to see someone else that isn't Frank Miller and Klaus Janson doing it has me very excited. Which I definitely want to talk about the new Frank Miller Ronin book, but we'll get into that in the post credits. So
there's a
Danny,
new Frank Miller Ronin
oh
book?
Yeah. Dick, we'll get into it.
There's
we'll get into
always
it.
a new Frank Miller Ronin book.
Danny, what is on the top of your pile this week?
Well, like Nick, I also had a lot of it was really hard to pick. There's a lot of good stuff next coming out next week. So let me do a quick rundown of some really good stuff because I want people when people post their pull lists on our Discord, I want them to be just as big as mine. Because
we're all competing to beat Danny's pull list every week.
Everyone should suffer like me. We have a new team on Detective Comics. We have a new Elseworlds Green Lantern story, a new Iron Man book launching, new team on Nightwing, another Power Fantasy issue, the Leonardo issue of TMNT, Tin Can Society #2, a new Frankenstein issue, a new Satana issue. Like, out of all that stuff, what I picked was the new Absolute Wonder Woman #1.
Of course, yeah.
This is by Kelly Thompson, who Mike talked a little bit about, and I'll talk some more. With art by Hayden Sherman.
Crazy pick.
Dude, what a team. As they reinvent Wonder Woman from the ground up. Without the Island of Paradise, without the sisterhood that shaped her, without the mission of peace, what is left is the absolute Amazon. I love these pitches of like, hey, you know what these books are? We're going to take all the things you think you know about these characters and we're going to give you something new. And you do get something different and new, kind of. But I mean, just with this creative team behind, like, I just love the idea of like stripping down all these core characters to the bare necessities. But also the team, like this team, like Kelly Thompson, like I've been reading her stuff like pretty religiously for a long time.
Yeah.
The Black Widow run at Marvel, the Captain Marvel run, which I think is the longest run that I've ever seen for Carol. The Call was just like a mind blower of a book. Like,
yeah.
That came out of left field. Mike already talked about Black Cloak, Birds of Prey, Scarlet over at the G.I. Joe world. Like, Kelly Thompson she could write anything. Like,
and Powerpuff Girls, if I'm not mistaken, too, right?
Yes, the Powerpuff Girls too.
Powerpuff Girls #1 had no right being that good. Like, insane.
Yeah. So, I mean that should be enough for you to get to check out this Absolute Wonder Woman. But also, Hayden Sherman, his comic book style, it for the most part is like very chilling, very terrifying. Like, that's kind of what he dives deep into. So like, I kind of want to see how this Wonder Woman is gonna adapt, like this whole myth as a Wonder Woman. It's gonna now look through his lens, because I feel like this is a Wonder Woman that's coming straight out of hell, or something like that. So I'm very excited. I mean, I love the Absolute Batman, so like I can't wait to check out these other new Absolute books. They just announced Absolute Flash. They announced Absolute Martian Manhunter. I think Jeff Lemire's doing Flash. Speaking of Jeff Lemire, Dennis Camp is doing the Martian Manhunter with Javier Rodriguez. Like,
instant pull. I'm pulling a freaking Martian Manhunter book in the year 2024, 25. Right? That's insane to me.
Get your chacos ready. Man, I'm so excited. I can't keep saying this enough. We are like in a super upswing of comic books. and not just the big two, like everything. Like every week, I'm like, oh, I gotta check this out. Oh, I gotta check this out. Oh, I gotta check this out.
Yeah.
Discovering new creators and stuff like that. So yeah, very exciting stuff. Hopefully, whenever I come back on the show, I'll talk more about these absolute power books or these absolute books. So, but that's what I'm reading.
You know, that's great. That's a great way to segue to the end of our show, because I really want to talk about Absolute Batman, but we're not doing it here. We're going to do this in the post credits. So we're going to hit pause, stop here, and then we're going to just keep talking about it. So check this out on Patreon if you want to hear us talk at length about Absolute Batman, because I have so much to say. Yeah. But no, this is a great discussion, guys. I never thought that I would be like all in on like Ultimate Comics again, let alone a bunch of Absolute Batman and Wonder Woman. Like, I'm gonna try all these Absolute books because they all have pitches and creative teams that I'm like, how the hell do I not get in on this? I at least have to try it. Right? So yeah, I'm very excited for this one. That Dennis Camp on Martian Manhunter, I'm just like, yeah, whatever he's gonna do, I'm here for it, right?
And he said that's not gonna affect his Ultimate run. Like, it's all, he's still gonna be on that book as well. So
I'm totally up for that. That great, perfect. I can read 2 amazing books side by side. I love to hear that. Well, cool. I think that's going to wrap us up for the show, though. I want to say thank you to everyone who listened live. Thank you, everybody on Discord. You're fantastic people. I don't know what we're doing next week, but it's probably going to be a good episode. I promise you. I want to say thank you to Zander for editing. Thank you to Paul for proof listening today. Thank you to Danny and Nick for being on the show with me this week. I guess until next time, comics are good, and so are you.